So we're so glad you're here. The Schuylkill Center, I want to remind you all, is open. Our trails are open. The visitor center is open. Come for a walk. Our forests have been really restorative, palliative for people in the pandemic. Great space to be outdoors with fresh air. So do come for a walk. Do come for our visitor center. If you're new to the Schuylkill Center, we're in Upper Roxborough, schuylkillcenter.org, and you can find us there. Love to have you come for a visit. We are an environmental education center that's been doing programming for more than 50 years. School programming, summer camp, all kinds of things. So long track record of educating not just kids, but also adults like you all tonight. So lots of different programming. Check out our calendar on our web too. So there's many things coming up, like our signature Halloween hikes and hay rides coming up in a couple of weeks. We also operate a preschool, nature preschool, the first nature-based preschool in the state of Pennsylvania. It's in our 9th year. Actually, we were able to keep our nature preschool classes meeting all last year throughout the pandemic because the kids were outside virtually every day, even in the winter. So check out our nature preschool. We have one of the more ambitious environmental art programs of any nature center in the country. And we have outdoor and indoor installations. This is an ash tree that was actually turned into a sculpture by an artist, part of an exhibit on what's happening with the emerald ash borer and ash trees. It's called All Fall Down. As in ashes, ashes, we all fall down. So check out our environmental art program. The current show is Al Mudif, a confluence. A Mudif is the Arabic word for an Iraqi guest house, which is made from reeds. Iraqis have been building these in the marshes of the lower Tigris and Euphrates since the Sumerians 5,000 years ago. So there's a long history, but remarkably, one has never been built outside of Iraq. So though there's a long tradition of building reed houses, guest houses out of reeds, one was never done outside of Iraq. So obviously to us at the Schuylkill Center, if one is going to be done outside of Iraq, it should be in Roxborough. So we've built a Mudif in May into June. It's been open. We're in the last few weeks of the exhibition being open. The Mudif will actually stay open into November, and then we'll take off the roof. But this is all made for the winter. This is all made out of an invasive grass called Phragmites, collected at the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge and the Upper Roxborough Reservoir Preserve. So it's all local Phragmites, a non-native invasive reed grass that actually is the grass that Iraqis would be using in Mesopotamia. Alongside it, artist Sarah Cabbage, a Pacific Northwest artist, has been doing sculptures that are essentially benches with also Phragmites and thatching. And there are many of these at nature centers like ours across the Delaware watershed. So if you're walking at Tinicum, for example, you might stumble on a couple of these. So they're throughout the watershed area. So we have Sarah's bench in conversation with Yarub is the gentleman who designed the Mudif. So the two are in conversation with each other. Come see that. There is an indoor exhibition in our art gallery associated with the Mudif that tells the story of them building that. So check out our environmental art program, especially the Mudif. We also operate the only wildlife clinic in the city of Philadelphia, one of the very few in the region, working on sick, injured, orphaned wild animals like this red-tailed hawk you can see in the picture. And we do a lot of baby squirrels. So our clinic is a wonderful program with dedicated staff who work on a lot of animals, many of them, baby squirrels like this. We also have lots of volunteer programs. Even now, our volunteer program disappeared for a year, and we've been slowly rebuilding a distanced outdoor volunteer program where we do things like tree planting. This is the Fanatic helping us 2 Earth Days ago. We're also a membership-based organization. If you're a member, thank you so much. If you're not, we'd love to have you as a member. You receive discounts on programs in our gift shop. We have the best birdseed in the Delaware Valley. Check out that in our gift shop. Plus you get advance notice of programs like this one. So feel free to join. You can join online, schuylkillcenter.org. I mentioned this is the second in a 5-part series. Next week, we're actually going to get an update on the monarch and its story. So as many of you probably know, the monarch butterfly migrates from here to a couple of mountain valleys, secluded mountain valleys in Mexico, not far from Mexico City. It's a remarkable story. It's an incredible migration. And as you probably have heard, populations have been plummeting. So we're going to get an update actually from Dr. Chip Taylor, who is the founder of Monarch Watch. He's a University of Kansas professor who's been a lead on the monarch story and monarch research for more than 30 years. So the founder of Monarch Watch from Kansas is going to be Zooming with us next week to give you a front row seat on the monarch. So its story in general, and then specifically how it's doing this year. So check out, come back next week. And then in 2 weeks, Rolled on the Wing, the Global Odyssey of Migratory Birds. So how do birds get from A to B to C to D? This is actually a lake in China where author Scott Weidensaul, who's a Pennsylvania native actually, grew up and lived for many, many years near Hawk Mountain, north and west of us, does research on snowy owls like this one here. He bands them and does research on them. Great writer, wonderful writer. His book is called, this is the name, Rolled on the Wing. It's for sale in our gift shop if you want to do a book club kind of thing where you can listen to Scott talk. He's a great photographer. He's a great speaker. He's a great writer. So just a wonderful, wonderful person with, again, a front row seat on the story of bird migration, which is also trouble, has its own different kinds of trouble. So check out Scott in a couple of weeks and come to the lecture whether or not you've read the book. But if you want the book, it's in our gift shop. Love to give you a copy of that. And then the series concludes on November 4th. It's Indigenous Peoples Month in November. And so we have 3 members of the Lenape Nation talking about the relationship, the long relationship of Lenape and land. And it's an incredible story in that when European settlers first began coming, especially in the early 1600s, for example, we were a highly managed, Pennsylvania was already a highly managed landscape, that the Lenape were practicing fire ecology and were rearranging which trees grew where to their benefit. So it wasn't a virgin wilderness that was untouched and that they were treading lightly. They were managing it. They were foresters and forest ecologists, and they understood which trees they wanted and kept them close. So wonderful story, the Lenape and the land, November 4th. And then at the end, later towards Thanksgiving, we're going to be offering the 16th annual Henry Meigs Environmental Leadership Award. Henry was the longest serving trustee on our board for more than 30 years, one of our founders from one of our founding families. So when he passed away 16 years ago, his family created an Environmental Leadership Award in his honor, in his name, to keep his memory alive. This year's recipient is Mindy Maslin, who is the founder of Tree Tenders and has helped plant 20,000 trees in and around the city of Philadelphia, and has trained almost 6,000 tree tenders over a 30-year span. So for all that work planting trees, she's getting our Environmental Leadership Award to begin, and then she becomes part of a panel discussion on trees in the urban landscape, especially Philadelphia's plan for reforesting essentially the city. So that's on Thursday, November 18th. The intention is to do it live in our auditorium, but stay tuned for further details and it'll be on our website. So hope you can join us for that. The Eagles are playing tonight, so we'll be done by kickoff. So do not worry, kickoff is at 8:20. And Jalen Hurts will be an upset. You've heard it here first. Upsets Tom Brady. But we're here to talk about the city's trash crisis. I'll turn this off. And as a lead into this, we offer you a couple of thoughts and then bring in our speakers one by one. So as you probably know, the city has been troubled by trash for decades, earning us the sad nickname of Filthadelphia. Each year, Philadelphia disposes of almost 1.5 million tons of residential and commercial waste, 55% of it being landfilled, 45% being incinerated, burned. Sadly, fully half of our curbside recycling is being incinerated and not recycled. A third of our trash is food waste, much of which is compostable, but it's not composted yet because of a lack of proper facilities. And as you all know far too well, too much of that trash ends up in our streets, in vacant lots, and in our waterways. In the pandemic, household trash increased some 30% as so many people worked from home, ordering takeout food and ordering from Amazon. At the same time, the number of sanitation workers plummeted as workers got sick or quit in fear or disgust. Mountains of trash grew, and pickup became unpredictable and increasingly erratic. Here in Roxborough, there was even a famous incident of the street department finding households for putting out their trash on trash day. As I drove actually through Roxborough today on the way home, trash had not been picked up yet, and it was past 5:30. So the troubles continue. It is a literal and figurative mess. So tonight we have assembled a wonderful panel of experts and activists to help with our dumpster dive into the trash crisis. We've got three great guests who are here to answer all your questions on trash. So fire up the chat feature. Fire up the chat feature on Zoom. Make sure you can find the button on the bottom. So our first guest is Ron White. He's a Philadelphia environmental activist, advocate, and consultant. His Deep Green Philly project is an alternative media resource inspired by the deep ecology movement. As project coordinator for Trash Academy, a project of mural arts, he works with artists, students, and residents to find creative solutions for Philadelphia's trash, litter, and dumping crisis. Ron, welcome.
Hey, Mike, good to be here.
So glad you're here. Thank you so much. Then Nick Esposito is a writer, publisher, community activist, urban farmer, and circular economy professional. We'll find out what that means. Nick has served as the City of Philadelphia's Zero Waste and Litter Director. He is currently the head of cities for the global litter intelligence company, Litterati, and the Director of Policy and Engagement for Circular Philadelphia. He's also been president of the East Kensington Neighbors Association. Nick, so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Really happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Our third guest is Terrell Hagler, better known on social media as your fave trash man, a former sanitation worker who, at the beginning of the pandemic, began advocating for better protective equipment for sanitation workers and started raising money through social media for PPE. He has been organizing community cleanups in different parts of the city, often in environmental justice communities, and partners with civic groups. He's helped form local cleanup groups, including the Roxborough Cleanup Crew, which operates in the neighborhood near the Schuylkill Center. Terrell, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
My pleasure. And actually, I'm going to show my copy of the September issue of Philadelphia Magazine, where it says, "The Trash Man Cometh." Terrell Hagler, Instagram darling and burgeoning sanitation superstar, thinks he can fix what ails Philly by solving our maddeningly entrenched garbage problems. Well, we'll talk about that, but you're a sanitation superstar.
Some would say that. Some might say that.
That's awesome. So actually, let me start with you for a second too. People probably wonder, what does it mean to be a sanitation superstar on Instagram? So would you quickly give us a sort of a thumbnail sketch of your fave trash man and what has happened to you?
Sure. So I began working as a Philadelphia sanitation worker December 2019. And we all know 3 months later, COVID hit. And by the summer, by June, there had been an outbreak in the sanitation department that no one was talking about. And by July, there were 300 sanitation workers that had tested positive or were quarantining because of COVID. And our higher ups, leaderships, the streets department, the mayor, no one had a plan to deal with it. And I have 3 kids, and I refused to get my kids sick. So I took it upon myself to raise awareness of what sanitation workers were going through and started documenting it on Instagram as your fave trash man. And then I started selling t-shirts to raise money for PPE and cleaning supplies, because I figured out the reason that it was spreading so fast is because there's no separation in the truck. We sit 3 in a truck, 6 inches away from each other. And if I use my truck from 7 to 3 and somebody else is using it from 3 to 9, and then I get back in it in the morning, the person that, may test positive was in it last night. There's no cleaning process of the truck. And as a sanitation worker, I was only making $31,000 a year when I first got in. So I didn't have enough money to buy cleaning supplies every week. So I ended up selling t-shirts, and I raised $32,000 in 4 weeks for PPE and cleaning supplies, and spread it amongst the yards and the department. And that's kind of how, what I tell people, I accidentally went viral. So during that campaign, I found myself on the Kelly Clarkson Show, Worldwide News with David Muir, Good Morning America, the cover of the Philadelphia Inquirer. I mean, the list goes on and on. This past July, I had the opportunity to go to the White House for a private barbecue. But now I spend my time advocating for Philadelphia to be zero litter by 2025. And I've created a nonprofit to organize neighborhood cleanups. So I've done 32 neighborhood cleanups so far this year, and I've picked up over 27 tons of trash off the streets so far this year with my neighborhood cleanups. So that's where I spend my time.
It's an amazing story. So thank you so much. Nick, you also have a unique perspective on trash, as you were until recently, or until the pandemic, the director of the city's zero waste program, and then you were released in the early days of the pandemic. Can you tell us your own story and your own perspective on trash?
Sure. So yeah, I was working for the city for almost 10 years by the time I left. And I had been, first I started off in Parks and Recreation, started off with land care management, workforce development, and then got into became the sustainability manager for the department. So I say that to say, I came from a kind of operational standpoint. So when I joined the administration, as they call it, a lot of times when people join the administration, they come in from like outside sectors, from the for-profit sector, the nonprofit sector, other governments, like whatever it is, they come to Philly. And, I was kind of, came up through the system. So I I'd worked in operations in Parks and Rec. When I got the job as Zero Waste and Litter Director, a lot of things that I was already doing at Parks and Rec kind of fit into that. I helped like really kind of expand the outdoor recycling program for all the rec centers to make sure that every rec center had coverage in the city that my predecessor, Daniel Lawson, took over. Food recovery, composting, all these different things. So I was already doing that in the city. And I always, as you mentioned, I have an urban farming background and a farming background. I say like farmers are the original zero wasters in an industry, right? If you run a farm correctly, there's no waste on it, right? You save seeds, you create compost, you use anything on the farm to build whatever. So I already had that mindset, and I became Zero Waste and Litter Director. And it was some of the proudest work I've done. It was a big feat, basically coming in to bring all of these, commissioners and department heads and even interagency departments, SEPTA, PennDOT, all these different groups around this issue of zero waste and litter. So, I think where we were really successful was, one is we had a lot of buy-in at the time from the mayor and from the managing director at the time, Mike DiBaradinis, and we were working really hard, and we had a really great structure for organizing and finding out like what the needs were, and just a really solid strategy. And I was just having this conversation with a colleague before this about Philly's power. It wasn't just that it was a zero waste goal. I didn't walk into a room and tell a bunch of people that are suffering with trash in the city, oh, by 2035, we're going to have zero waste, which is great. We're not going to use incinerators or landfills, but they want to see what's going to happen on their block right now. How is this going to affect me? And we were able to bring the litter issue in to say, if we update our waste management systems and bring them into the 21st century, we are going to invariably solve the litter problem, because that's where the litter is coming from. It's mismanaged waste. And how do we stop this? So again, found a lot of successes we could talk about tonight. And then, at the end came when, the cabinet was just basically not a priority in the administration. They had to make some budget cuts. And for some reason, they decided to cut the zero waste and litter cabinet budget, even though they kept on some of the people and some of the work. And, it was a really rough time. And I do want to comment on this because this is really important, is that, and which really frustrates me right now, is what Terrell said, I can definitely validate and second. As the pandemic was hitting, I was on a WhatsApp channel with all my worldwide colleagues all around the world. And I was getting constant messages about what they were doing to keep sanitation departments safe. I saw what they were doing in Washington, D.C., Baltimore, all of these places. And I didn't see that it was happening where we were. And I was, writing memos. I was writing saying, this is what we have to do. This is how we can set the system up to keep the workers safe. Because if we don't, exactly what Terrell said was going to happen. And it did. And, it's just, I tell that story just to say, one, to validate what Terrell said and say that it is true. And second, to say that it just comes from this lack that Philadelphia just sometimes has with our leadership of just strategy and long-term planning. We had it when the cabinet started. I wish we could have continued it kind of going forward, but there's a lot of good people still fighting the good fight, both within city government, without, and we're going to keep on doing it.
Turn to Ron for a moment. Ron, most of our people on the program tonight have heard of mural arts, but probably fewer and they've seen the murals, but probably fewer have heard about the Trash Academy. Can you explain that for us for a moment? And why mural arts is intersecting with trash?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mike. So as you said, mural arts is mostly known for, the many murals around the city, and they're wonderful. Mural arts is the largest public arts institution in the whole entire country. And people come from all over to see the murals, and we think that's great. But what we're doing with Trash Academy is we're working with a different type of art, which is mostly social practice art. And so our art is concerned with making social change. And we are actually working on a mural for a big climate justice project we're working on that's debuting on October 27th. But in general, our work is mostly focused on going into the community and finding out like what's happening in the community and like what the needs are. And that's what happened with Trash Academy. In 2016, I'm pretty sure it was, that's when I first came into the project. There had been a series of community meetings with people in South Philly. And one thing that kept coming up over and over again was this issue of trash. People kept seeing the trash everywhere. There was a lot of, consternation and anger over people thinking that their neighbors were putting out their trash wrong. The city wasn't doing what they were supposed to do. All people really cared about, though, as Nick said, is like, how can we solve this ASAP? So the first project I worked on with Trash Academy was going into South Philadelphia High School, working with a 9th grade class to develop an educational tool that was translated into about 5 or 6 different languages to help people in that neighborhood understand and navigate the trash system. So that was our first project. And we went from that to working on the Philadelphia's plastic bag ban, going to city council, helping to raise awareness about bringing our own bag to the store instead of using plastic bags. So we were very influential in that campaign. And that's one of our proudest moments is when the Philadelphia, passed our plastic bag ban, which was delayed because of the pandemic.
Right.
But now it's actually happening, which is great. So I think this for us is proof that you can use art and creativity to affect social change.
Great. I've got more questions, but for everybody, start putting your questions in chat. I'll read them to our guests, Ron White from the Trash Academy, Terrell Hagler, better known as your fave trash man, and Nick Esposito. So let me start for any one of the three of you. When the pandemic hit and the wheels seemed to have fallen off the trash bus, was this like just a new problem for the city because of the pandemic, or did it sort of bring into relief problems that already existed, or a little bit of both? Terrell, you want to kick us off on that one?
Sure. For me, I am new to this space. Like I was a sanitation worker for 14 months from December 19 to February of this year, but I've really been living in the sustainability space since this January. But as a sanitation worker, for me, it highlighted the systematic issues. There's a systematic issue with Philadelphia, starting with our mayor down to our streets commissioner, down to supervisors and crew chiefs of the streets department. There's a systematic issue, and there's systematically things that have been wrong for years that are kind of bad habits that have been grandfathered in even before Carlton Williams was streets commissioner, with his predecessor, Karina.
So you're talking about like size of the crews and the routes that they drive and those kinds of things?
I'm talking about mindset. I'm talking about leadership. I'm talking about the ability to, integrate new ideas, the ability to just put ego aside and say, hey, this person actually has a good idea. I didn't come up with it, but it's going to fix the city. So let's go with it. There's a kind of, if I didn't come up with the idea, or if it didn't come from my office, it's not going to work kind of mentality. I'm sorry. To me, that's my truth. So as a sanitation worker, more and more, I dealt with lack of communication, lack of transparent operational, things. Like, I come into the yard, we're 4 days behind, and the crew chief is like, actually, I don't know where you should go. I'm like, pick a block. It doesn't matter because we're 4 days behind everywhere. But I would spend 2 to 3 hours sitting in the yard along with 12 other sanitation workers and 4 trucks not picking up trash because they didn't know where to send us.
Wow.
So it was those things that I'm pretty sure Nick can talk to it more, that were already happening, but now I'm experiencing it firsthand as a worker instead of a resident. And then when we go out, residents are like, well, it's 3 o'clock. You just getting here? And I'm like, you really don't understand how I sat in the yard from 7 to 12:30, not doing anything.
Wow.
And then we get out there and they want us to get our whole route up by 3:30. So to me, it definitely starts at leadership. It definitely starts at a priority thing. Trash is not a priority, in my opinion, to this administration.
Right.
And because it's not a priority to the administration, it's not a priority to the streets department.
And Nick, systemic issues with trash have probably kept you awake many nights, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard to like leave the cabinet and then watch, as you described, like June 2020, our like trash system basically collapsed in the city. But to your point, I mean, the cracks were there for a long time. And, where we came in with, when we created the cabinet, we looked at this as a positive. I mean, the thing we said was the streets department cannot solve this, and nor should they. And that's a good thing for them because it shouldn't be put on them, right? They're one part of this larger piece, because how waste is consumed, how waste is created, how the whole system is much larger than that. And that's why the cabinet wasn't just, the streets department and like some other departments that handled waste. I mean, we had commerce was a huge part of it. The planning department was a huge part of it, because we need to re-regulate, rethink of how we run society, basically. So there were these issues kind of before, and like many city governments known for this. It's not just the Philadelphia, but these kind of like siloing of things, people not working together. And, that was a big hallmark of the cabinet, getting people to see this as a collective issue and how we can collectively work together to fix it. So to your point, I mean, yeah, trash has been a huge problem in Philadelphia for a long time. There's many like geographic, environmental, like we have this density of New York City, but then we have like the vacant lots of Detroit at the same time, right? It's this weird thing that we have in the state. There's a lot. We were very cognizant of this when we wrote the Zero Waste and Litter Action Plan. We said this is a plan that needs to be tailored to Philadelphia. Like, sure, we need to look at other cities across the country and the world and how they do things, but we have unique conditions here, and we have to kind of solve for that. So again, this has been going on for a long time in the city. This problem has been perpetuating. And last point I'll make on this, and Terrell, I think, was very artfully making this point, is the ego that kind of gets in the way about like whose idea was what and who's doing this. And I mean, you even see it now, and like, you see politicians fighting about like gun violence while kids are literally being killed in the streets. Like, whose idea is this and who's to blame? And it's like, it's ridiculous. We have to just get together and pragmatically figure out how to run this city, because Philadelphia is just not a well-managed city right now. And it's had these issues for a long time, and we just need to figure out how to run the city. And if we do that right and create the better economic opportunity, the better living qualities for people, you're going to start addressing issues like we have with gun violence, poverty, things of that nature. So these things are all interconnected. And I guess where Terrell and I come from, it's hard to do this. I mean, Terrell can like come out and say this kind of stuff, but like when you've been on the inside, but we're people who know there are people still on the inside, and the people that are on the outside that want to just solve these problems and just do it for the sake of making a better Philadelphia.
So Fraser put a New York Times op-ed in the chat, so do check that out. Jessica works as an environmental health, safety, and sustainability manager for a company in Grace Ferry. They want to be a leader in these efforts in Philadelphia. How can we intersect with and support some of your programs, or just with the citizens in general? Anybody? What's your thoughts on how to help Jessica?
You want to go first, Nick?
Well, I feel like, and Ron can kind of speak to this too, because of a lot of like the work that he does with residents and citizens. One, I will say, I know Jessica, I know the organization she's talking about. I'm proud to say they're a member of Circular Philadelphia as well. So yeah, kudos to that. And again, just kind of, getting involved with, and that's a big thing, right? Businesses are kind of, it's not just like residents and people moving back into cities and this kind of reurbanization. It's like businesses are seeing it too. There's a lot of times where businesses were leaving cities. I mean, that's what happened to Philly, right? In the 70s and 80s, there was so much industry leaving that left all this vacancy that kind of led to a lot of these issues we're talking about. So to see businesses that come in and they're just not trying to profit here or capitalize on being centrally located or have a good PR thing, but actually giving back and being a part of the city. So I know, again, the company Jessica works for and the work that, they've been doing to kind of integrate themselves with just like different community. I think that's really important. And yeah, I guess, that's one thing, just an organization, especially like Circular Philadelphia, that is trying to really lay the groundwork for the circular economy here in the city. finding those organizations to kind of be a part of, to support and be part of those larger networks, because there's power in those numbers. I work in the private sector, so I get a little uncomfortable when people are just like, the private sector is the problem. That's where all the, private sector is also where a lot of, our life comes from, right? Like a lot of the things that, the goods we consume, the, energy we consume, all these different things. And if we can get the good players in that sector to work together and care not just about their customers, but the city they're sited in, I think we have something there. So, maybe I can turn it over to Ron, especially with all the
Ron, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that the private sector has a big role to play. The problem is that we need to invest in that. Like, if people have ideas, there has to be a way for people to bring these ideas to the marketplace. In many other countries, green technologies, sustainability initiatives, they're heavily subsidized by the government. Here, what are we subsidizing here? We're subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. We're subsidizing fracking. We're subsidizing things that are contributing to the problem, but we're not so much subsidizing those things that are actually going to solve the problem. So we see what's happening right now in Congress, at the federal level with this Build Back Better initiative stalling. There's also initiatives in Congress around zero waste that we need to push through. But until we start solving this political dysfunction that we're facing in our country, it's going to be very difficult to get the kinds of initiatives funded and done that we really need.
Only
Yes,
thing I
Terrell.
would add is that like Nick, who's a doer, like myself, Nick has started a company called Circular Philadelphia, which is going to change the landscape of the city. And also myself and another person named Morgan Berman, we've actually created an app called Glitter. And Glitter pays people to clean the litter off the ground, off the streets on a weekly basis. So just like Nick, we're just tired of waiting on the government to make a decision. And we're tired on them to decide how important clean streets are, on whether they, want to make it a priority or not. So if any, I think her name was Jessica, along with Nick, if you want to download our app, you can report litter. Nick's cabinet made an amazing litter index in 2019 and the administration gave up on it. So we want to use Glitter and with Nick's help to try to rebuild the litter index. So you can report litter.
That's great.
On our app. You can report illegal dumping. You can sign up for some of my cleanups, but also you can subscribe for your block to be clean once a week for a month for $140 a month. And you can share that with your neighbors, or you can get a business to sponsor it. So
who's funding that?
So the city is not funding it, right. But we have about 25 blocks that we're cleaning right now, and they're all funded by citizens of Philadelphia. I have former Mayor Michael Nutter is sponsoring 7 blocks in his old neighborhood in West Philly.
Got it.
Yeah. Then we've had like seed money come from Comcast and ShopRite and Sierra Initiative and other places. And I've just been kind of like using my brand and my network to get people to buy in.
Right.
To subscribe for people to, Fraser dropped the link that, clean streets and cleaner neighborhood reduces gun violence almost 29%.
Right.
So that's one way that I am.
Right. Clean streets and trees.
Yep. Yeah.
Gun violence reduces when you plant trees too. It's extraordinary. Yeah.
So in the App Store or the Android, it's called Glitter Zero Litter, and it's a multifaceted way for us to correspond with each other, because that's what we're lacking in the streets department is just communication. You got to go to Twitter to find out what the streets department is doing. They don't send anything home. They don't text. They don't send emails. And so hopefully with this app, we can actually build the bridge of between residents and, trying to beautify the city.
That's great. Oh, and Fraser put the how to get to Glitter in there. So that's great. Let me get to Eugene's question. Thanks, Eugene, about recycling. Given that half our recyclables are incinerated, to the great health detriments of residents in Chester and elsewhere, and exacerbating environmental health disparities, a personal issue to me, having grown up in a polluted area with asthma, is single stream still viable? Single stream recycling, I assume. Should we be pushing the city to focus on what is achievable, such as highly recyclable aluminum, et cetera. What can be done on recycling? Who wants a recycling question?
I can start with it and try to jump off. So
You got it.
yeah, just kind of being there. So thanks for the question, Eugene. And yeah, again, it's a travesty. I mean, and even a lot of the stuff that doesn't make it into the recycling, right? That's still going to either the incinerators or the landfills if it's just going as straight trash. So I am, again, the more and more that I've been working in this and watching it, the less and less that you see kind of that single stream being the viable option for that part of the processing. I mean, why single stream was such an important thing to bring to the city and why the streets department was such a supporter of it is that, yeah, it reduces the amount of trucks that you have to run. Now, I've been to cities around the world that are running 4 different trucks on different staggered schedules where they're picking up paper by itself, they're picking up aluminum by itself, they're picking up glass, they're picking up plastic, and then they have compost. They have a bunch of different trucks that are doing this. So it can be figured out. There are countries around the world that are doing it, and cities around the world. But the way that we do it here, just to kind of reduce the amount of how many trucks, and again, to Terrell's point is, we can't even get our trash and recycling picked up on time. Imagine having 5 different trucks running at the different times. We need better technology, better systems to run these trucks and the fleet in the streets department. But what we're doing at the circular economy, what we're trying to change to is rethinking what we talk about when we talk about recycling. I learned from this group called TerraCycle. They're based in Trenton. And when I went there one time, they said something, basically they said the equation for recycling is if you have a market and you have a process,
right,
you have recycling. That doesn't always add up, right? Because if you don't have a process for a material, which there's so many materials that we think are recyclable, they have the little kind of symbols on it. You see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you have no idea what that means, but it's recyclable, it goes in the blue bin. Most of it's not recyclable. California just passed a law saying you can't put those on there anymore because it's confusing and misleading to people. So with that and all the different processes that are coming out of it, everything going into one facility, having to be sorted, you're not getting like the most viable product out of that. Then the market comes in there as well, right? And there's so many problems with the market. Like I'm excited, I always show off my shoes that I have. My shoes are made of like 40 plastic bottles. That's awesome, right? That we have 40 plastic bottles that made my shoes. How many times do I buy shoes a year? Maybe every 2 years. I don't buy shoes that often. We have so many plastic bottles. I can buy a pair of shoes every day.
And those shoes are not recyclable themselves.
Exactly. And the shoes aren't recyclable themselves, right? So we're getting to this new place of just rethinking how products are made, who's responsible. There's, in the last 50, 60 years of waste management, we have been lied to by industry saying you're responsible for dealing with the waste, not us. We make the products, you consume them, you're responsible, use your tax money. That's changing. There's a thing in Europe that's really popular called extended producer responsibility that's getting the producers so to like actually pay for the packaging that they create. So it kind of gives them an incentive to reduce it, and also helps fund waste management. You're starting to see much more decentralized product, people that are taking it back. Like there's great, like Rabbit Recycling here in the city, Bennett Compost, people that are taking electronics, Retriever for textiles. You're seeing this huge market and landscape for these businesses. And as it decentralizes, city government has to catch up to it. So the fact that city government is just happy with funding one contract of waste management and they handle everything, it just doesn't work. So that's a long answer to your question, Eugene, but it is complex. Single stream is not working anymore. It hasn't been working for a long time. And we're seeing this shift into the circular economy where we can deal with this.
So a Schuylkill Center member named Lida wrote in, she couldn't be here tonight, but she's desperate to know what to do about litter. There's a lot of litter. Who wants that? Terrell, I know you got glitter as your app, you're picking up litter, but so as a structural problem, how do we what do we do about litter to have less of it? Besides picking it up, how do we stop making it?
Littering is actually a taught behavior. I pick my kids up and I see kids littering and I'm like, there's no way you just learned that at school. Like there's no way that, part of today's social studies lesson was to throw potato chip bags on the ground. So we have to first attack the mindset. But by attacking the mindset, for me, culturally, and a lot of brown and black neighborhoods, they're so underserved. There's so many lack of resources that they don't even have an opportunity to, even think about the environment because they're trying to pay their bills. They're trying to make sure their kids going to school. They're trying to duck bullets and stuff. So there's a lot of other things that affect. But if we can just get to the behavior of littering, if we could add more trash cans to these neighborhoods. You know, there's a guy in Germantown doing Love Thy Hood. He has the orange trash cans, and you could buy a trash can and he'll chain it to a corner in your neighborhood. And then you just have to put it out with your normal trash. But there's actually a law that if you have a corner store or a business, you're supposed to have a trash can in front of your business. That's an actual law. But then here we go to the systematic issue. Is it being enforced?
Enforced, right.
Are bodegas and stores like that getting ticketed for not having trash cans? So until that happens, until it's serious, until we have, you know, $1 million worth of tickets for people not having trash cans, then we'll see some change. So we have to shift the mindset and shift the behavior of what it is to actually litter. Because once we do that and we give resources and we change that, then it's easy. Just if the whole city this summer would have just chose to everybody on the third Saturday of every month clean 4 feet in front of your house and 6 feet each direction. If the whole city would do that for 4 months, I was told by somebody at Drexel that we could cut the litter down almost 68%.
Wow.
If we as a city just did it together on the same day,
right?
4 feet in front, 6 feet each directions, the third Saturday of every month, just everybody cleans their own neighborhood. But again, we have to get to the point where everybody is buying in, you know, like Ben Simmons just bought in to come in back to being a Sixer. Philadelphia has to buy in to determine that we deserve.
That's great. I did not expect a Ben Simmons reference tonight.
I was waiting for the opportunity.
I used to say all the time, like, because when the zero waste litter kind of started, like, trust the process. We have a process now, trust it. But like, you can't. I can't say that anymore because we don't really have a process.
Juan, can you get let's hear your take on litter and how we get less of it. Would you jump in here?
Yeah, I think I have a pretty complicated thought process on that, because, you know, I've seen people throw, you know, McDonald's out of their, you know, pickup truck windows. I've seen people, you know, just throw chip bags on the street. So on one hand, it is a behavioral issue, but then on the other hand, I think to myself, you know, people litter in Society Hill, they litter in Rittenhouse Square, they litter in, you know, Museum neighborhood, but you just don't see a lot of trash on the street when you go to some of these places. And I do believe people are littering there. I do believe that litter does happen there. So I'm always wondering, you know, why is litter, especially visible litter, so much of a problem in certain areas of the city and not so much of a problem in other areas? And I think it goes back to something that was mentioned before, which is about this like systemic dysfunction in the city that has been going back for decades. And it's related to the poverty. It's related to, as Terrell mentioned, all the different complexities of oppression taking place in these communities where the environment is not their number one concern. And we have to ask ourselves, you know, why is it that we're almost like living in two different Philadelphias, where one is pretty much always maintained and kept well managed and clean, and there's another Philadelphia that is always overburdened with trash and always overburdened with litter? We have to ask ourselves, like, what's really going on here?
And there's tons of behavioral studies that point to litter begets litter. When people see littered areas, they will litter in an area. Right. It's just it's so. And what happens is, yes, there is people throwing litter on the ground, and like Terrell said, and I think you're pointing that out because it does exist, and we shouldn't turn a blind eye to that. But the design, like how you design this stuff out to begin with, right? And to Ron's point, like I've said this forever, and I want more data to back this up, but I feel like most litter comes from how we set trash out. We set our trash out in Philadelphia for many host of reasons. We don't have lids on trash cans. We're majority rental city now. Landlords don't give people trash cans, so they're just putting stuff out. And there's a lot of waste that's being created because of the design of how products are designed. So it's just a sick cycle that's been created that litters things out. And then when people see that in an area that has a lot of density, not as many resources, not as many trash cans, not constant trash pickup, you're going to litter on the ground. And it just becomes this self-fulfilling sick cycle that we need to break.
I just want to piggyback off of Nick. I just read a report about Baltimore. You know, Baltimore and Philly, they get compared a lot. The city of Baltimore just spent $10 million, I think, over the last 2 years, and bought every resident standardized trash cans. Every resident in Baltimore has the same trash can now. And their litter, I think, was cut by almost 40%.
Wow.
Within the first 3 months.
Is that because they have a standardized truck that picks up the can in the right way?
I mean that, but also when you standardize the trash can with a lid, there's no way for rodents to get in the can, rip it open for the wind to blow it down the street.
Right.
Right. And so see, they invested in that. They invested in the solution that will help, mitigate the trash problem here. That's what we need here. We need the government. And I appreciate people saying that we need to get everyone together to solve this problem. I do believe in that as well. But a lot of people don't have time to go out and clean. They don't have the energy. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. That's why their neighborhood is dirty, because they're working themselves to death almost just to stay afloat. They don't have time. They shouldn't have to come home from working 2 and 3 jobs to clean up a bunch of litter and trash. That's the city's job. The city should be doing that. I don't know why they think that everything has to be our responsibility. Like, what are they doing?
Right. This is really important. We may come back to this, but let me get through a whole bunch of questions. So big chain of questions. Carmela has a wonderful one. Should the city legalize chickens so that they eat much of the food waste that is thrown in people's trash? Legalize chickens.
Yes.
Ron says yes.
Yes. Yes. For many reasons, but yes, waste is one of them.
The foxes will say thank you. So you are saying that even if recycling goes into a separate recycling truck, it still gets incinerated most of the time?
I just want to unpack that a little bit. So
Please.
basically what happened was when I was I was zero waste and litter director, what happened was there was a lapse in the contract of the recycling contract. We were changing over for contract. And when that happened, it happened at the worst possible time. As I think some people might know in this call, if you follow this, basically China took a lot of the world's recycling. They were just taking mass volumes of it, paying people pretty well for it because they just needed the material. China, because they can make these decisions, like the way their governments is structured, they were just able to say finally, like, we have enough material domestically now. No, thank you, rest of the world, and just cut us off. And people turned the recycling industry on its head. So as we expired on the contract and the streets department hadn't gotten a new contract in place, there were some complications with that. It was the worst possible time because there weren't a lot of companies that were willing to take this because people were losing so much money. So the only contract that they could get at the time basically said, we'll take recycling from half of the city, the recycling with the biggest, the best recycling rates, which again, as Ron will point out, tends to be in the wealthier neighborhoods where a lot of these resources have been around for a long time and a lot of this education has been more invested in. So they were taking it from there. They finally got the contract back on pace. We got back to picking up recycling in every neighborhood and it was going to the plant. Now, once it gets to the MRF, that's what they call it, the material recovery facility, most stuff doesn't get recycled. I mean, it's 9% of all plastic ever created has ever been recycled, right? It's a really hard to recycle materials the way we collect and the way we do it in this country. As the pandemic is set in now, you've seen it on your block. I mean, where I live in East Kensington, I mean, I think I could count on one hand during the pandemic up until now, how often I would see my recycling actually get picked up. Now it's more regular. So the last couple of months it has been, but because they were so short staffed and they were just trying to get stuff off the street, a lot of the trash, I don't have an exact number of what was being incinerated during the pandemic, but a decent amount of recycling was because they just didn't have the technology and the strategy to be able to pick it up separately.
Yep. It's 7:51. We're going to go to a little past 8, like 8:05-ish, 8:06-ish. All right. So we're going to try to burn through some questions. How is it going with teaching in schools what recycling is? Hadley says, Ben Salem is not good. Also upcycling too. I don't know how much. Well, as an environmental education center, I should know how much, but I don't know that it's constant or consistent. Anybody have thoughts on teaching?
It's funny. I just wrote a children's book about how essential sanitation workers are to the community.
Yeah.
And why we have to teach our kids not to litter now.
Okay, so I know where you're having your launch party. Let's talk.
So yeah, so I'm in the pre-sales of my book. It's called. Here's a shameless plug. I'll put it in the chat as well. You can go to Kickstarter.com and look up "I'm Cool Too" with TOO. Basically, I have 3 kids, and they were like, "Your job sucks. You stink all the time. You wear ugly boots. You always dirty. Like, why you can't be a firefighter? Why you can't be a policeman? Why you can't, my youngest daughter was like, I would even take you being like a forest ranger over a sanitation worker." And I was just like, you guys don't understand. Like, if daddy doesn't get the trash off the ground and somebody's mom is having a heart attack and the EMTs have to go through all the trash, that is valuable time wasted. So I just spent so much time trying to convince my kids that I was cool that I named the book I'm Cool Too. So that is one way that I'm trying to first, teach them at that preschool, pre-K to third grade. But I've talked to my kids' school, and this year for the first year, their school is going to organize a cleanup. They've never done a cleanup before, but I think we need to, like I said, is that taught behavior, behavior.
I did a cleanup for my 6th grade class at Earth Day 1970 and knew I found what I wanted to do. Here I am all these years later. Yeah, that's great. Dave says, yes to what Nick said, as consumers, we should pay more upfront for plastic of the cost of their disposal. Let me push on. What about holding companies like Aramark and school lunch programs where they sell Wawa water in schools? Can we hold them to taking more responsibility, reducing and recycling and education?
Yeah, we have to, and it's not just education. I mean, again, you have to design this stuff out, and the businesses have the R&D, they have or research and development, they have the technology to do it. And again, that's what Circular Philadelphia is around for, is to really work with these businesses that want to make this change, that see this as an issue and an existential issue. It's like, what good is being in business if we don't have a planet to live on? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's not going to work. And there are not enough, but there are more and more companies that are really waking up to this and making meaningful change. And what I love about the circular economy, and I just want to touch on this real quick. And again, I'm glad to see there's some like Circular Philadelphia members here, is that I think one of the problems in sustainability is that it comes with this message that we've gone too far and now we need to reduce, we need to take away, we need to limit ourselves. Coming to a city like Philadelphia with a 24% poverty rate and telling people that live in poverty that they need to reduce and consume less and not have enough, they're like, and especially people that are out of poverty and just kind of like first generation, maybe that went to college, that have like gotten themselves out of poverty, be like, I just got here. Like, now you're telling me like I don't belong, like I can't be here. Like, what are you talking about? And that's where like I love the circular economy, is like what it talks about is we just need to remake our economy into a thing that designs out waste, that treats our planet much better, and also is a better economic system to distribute wealth out to more people. And it's a better deal for everybody. To come with that message is really important. And there's enough businesses that are taking that message on. You can make money, you can be in business, but you can do it responsibly.
Well, I think you addressed this, but I think I want to come back to it. Donna says, I may be old and cranky, but I'm astounded by what I see people throw out of their cars. I can't even imagine the thought process. There's a section of highway where the Schuylkill Expressway connects to I-95, and it looks like a third world country. It's heartbreaking. What would you say to Donna?
Yeah, the trash issue is so important that we made it one of our major planks in this upcoming climate justice initiative that I mentioned, and I'm going to put info about that in the chat. So, normally people focus on air, land, and water as the main environmental things. We focused on air, land, and trash because here in Philly, it's such a huge issue. And I think it's not something that's going to be solved overnight. We really have to have a lot of deep discussions. We have to understand the environmental racism and environmental justice aspect to trash. You have to understand the political aspect, the way that the government needs to get more involved, the way that we have to get more involved as consumers, as people who are buying these products. We have to have some kind of responsibility. So there's so many different dimensions to this that I think that we really have to spend time studying it, educating ourselves, really advocating. When we see people like Terrell doing great things out there, we have to support them, put our energy and time and money behind people who are working to solve this problem. And I do believe in government stepping in, but I also believe that we have to step in ourselves when government isn't doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Fraser wonders how effective the Philly 311 app is, and Neil piles on that he's had the best success contacting 311 via Twitter. If you call, the wait is insane. So Philly 311.
I'll take that one. I'm actually an advocate for 311 because most people don't understand. 311 creates the ticket. 311 is the messenger. They say don't kill the messenger. 311 creates the ticket and notifies the streets department that there's an illegal pile here, you missed a block here, this, that, and the third. It then is on the streets department to then execute the ticket. So they send out a crew chief or they send out a manager to then go find the pile and certify that there's an illegal dump there. And more times than not, the crew chief doesn't feel like it. So what he'll do is, oh yeah, I drove past and I didn't see it. So you can just close the ticket out. And then they go back and tell 311, hey, all taken care of, all done, good job, thank you. So then 311 sends the message to the consumer like, hey, ticket closed out, thank you so much, all good. And then you open up your blinds and you see that the pile is still there and everyone's blaming 311, when actually 311 is just doing exactly what the streets department said they did. The streets department said that they actually got the pile. So I'm an advocate for 311. It is a little bit difficult to use the app and it is easier on Twitter. But again, for me, my blame goes to the streets department for not executing the ticket and just saying, I've seen it done with my own eyes. I've actually been on a truck when it was like, we don't feel like picking up this illegal power. We're just going to say we didn't see it.
And just a second on that is the trust, again, the process, create the process. Because if you don't have the process, to Terrell's point, like, even though there's problems, it's a better alternative than the other one, which is basically the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's the people who are connected, who can get to like commissioners or city council people and get things taken care of in their neighborhood. It's not equitable for the people that don't have that kind of access. So to set up a well-functioning system that puts out work orders, that there's accountability and good oversight, like, it's not perfect 311, but it's done a lot of great work in the last couple of years to really kind of like trying to sort this out. I've been there in the rooms trying to figure this out with departments, and like, we got to build on it rather than kind of like throw it out.
Heather used the 311 app in Pittsburgh all the time and it worked wonderfully. Janice loves the support for the 311. I think she's a former 311 director in DC, Charlotte, and Atlanta. We have a great audience here. This is great. I hope you're all using 311. We've been focusing on the problems. You know, I was thinking back to, I mentioned that I was doing a litter cleanup in the first Earth Day in 1970 as a 6th or 7th grader. There has been progress. I mean, curbside recycling was unheard of back then. In 1970, we were dumping everything in the ocean. Like New York City's trash was going right into a bite in the ocean. It's a place where, you know, there was no oxygen from all the trash. So we stopped ocean dumping. We've invented curbside recycling. So there has been some progress. Anybody want to jump on that? Is there any silver lining to this big cloud we've been talking about?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, for sure, the youth climate strikes and all that youth energy around climate change, they're also now starting to focus on plastics and on, you know, like the circular economy issue, and understanding that, you know, addressing the environmental crisis cannot be addressed if we don't really solve and fix this trash issue and the issue of us generating all of this waste and garbage that's being dumped in the oceans, that's being incinerated to contribute to air pollution and health issues. So I really am hopeful when I see that there's a new generation coming up that are really mobilizing and really serious about solving these problems.
Second that.
Nick is snapping. Okay, good. I got one more question for each of you, and then I'm going to give you actually 2 questions, one from me and then one from PJ. So PJ's question, I'll ask you each in turn. If you were mayor, what would be the first change you would make? But I'm going to piggyback that, and I got a question for you first. Nick, would you tell us about Circular Philadelphia? You made that reference several times, and also Literati. What's that besides being a great name?
Sure. So real quick, if I was mayor, one thing I would do is I would create in the managing director's office or somewhere a structure like a Department of Public Works. We tried doing this in managing director's office. It's a lot harder. Most cities, they function well because all of these operating departments are not just in like kind of name or like, you know, there's the commissioners have to report to the managing director. They are kind of like structured in a way of operations works in tandem. It's crazy that like the park system is, and the parks operation departments are different than the sanitation department districts and the L&I districts. It's not all on the same page. It needs to be on the same page. I think having a Department of Public Works would be huge here. So Circular Philadelphia is a membership-based organization that brings together businesses, individuals, organizations, thought leaders, and academics to basically drive towards what we consider the circular economy. So we consider the 20th century economy was this linear economy. You make, take, and trash. So we're just getting rid of resources not in this cycle. As Ron just said, there's new generations that it has to be in a cycle. We have to put this back in. So how do
cradle
we
to cradle is also they call it? That's
create that cycle. Exactly. So there are a lot of businesses that are looking to do that. And we're here to work on policy, how to get the right policies to level the playing field, how to get investment, like Ron said, to make sure that it's being invested in correctly at the same levels that, you know, we're investing in other things right now in our society. We work on education and outreach. And then finally, that comes to market transformation. How do we transform the market? So, you know, years from now, circularity is just how we do things, and that's how the economy runs. So it's a great organization. Please join it. You can join as an individual. You go to circularphiladelphia.org, and I can put it in the chat. Real quick, Literati it's a mobile app that connects back to a platform for our government, corporate, and nonprofit users. So basically, anyone can download the Literati app. It's free in the App Store or the Google Play. You take pictures of litter, and then you can tag them with the material, object, or brand, or our machine learning algorithms could tag it as well. All that information gets ingested, and then the organizations, the governments, even corporations that pay for access for the people that they get to kind of do these, what we call challenges, they get all of that data. So we work with cities to kind of understand, this is your litter problem. This is the material, object, and brand, and here's what you can do about it. So yeah, we're working all around the world, and that's what we do at Literati.
That's great. So Ron, tell us about the October 27th event. Also tell us about Deep Green Philly, if you wouldn't mind, and then if you were mayor.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'll start if I was mayor. I would ban all single-use plastics and all this other disposable junk that we have, and also invest in alternative solutions. So people who are making reusable alternatives to the clamshells, people who are making, reusable bags, I would put funding into that, and I would just ban all this other stuff. As other countries and other cities have done. We can do that here. Your question about Deep Green Philly, that is an online resource that I started about 10 or so years ago. That's really wanted to focus on the environmental crisis from a more leftist perspective, from a perspective that was focusing on indigenous issues, from a perspective that was maybe focusing more on environmental justice and environmental racism. And that's what I'm focusing on now, working with a nonprofit. So yeah, the Deep Green Philly thing is more like a personal project that I really have just been using to put out perspectives. I've interviewed people on there, like academics, scientists, so forth, just putting out my own personal perspective. And what was the other question? Oh yeah, about our event on October 27th. Yes, yep. October 27th. We're going to be doing a really creative and fun skit that educates people about the trash incineration and environmental racism issue in Chester and also here in Philly. It's going to be really fun, really exciting. It's going to be at Cherry Street Pier. That's going to be Wednesday, October 27th from 6 to 8:30. We're also going to have a gigantic mural projection. So it's going to be a projection of our brand new mural design that will hopefully be going up next year. And it's going to be Philadelphia's first climate justice mural. So you want to come see that and check that out. That's great.
Thank you so much. And Terrell, if you were mayor, what would you do here? And also, when does your Netflix special come out?
If I was mayor, I would definitely fire Carlton Williams, and I would offer the streets commissioner job to Nick. And I've told him that many of times. He knows I'm really dead serious about it. And then I would also have Nick in the cabinet create right now, an intermediate and a long-term transparent strategic plan on how we're going to clean Philadelphia. I think that's what, all of us are on here to really try to figure out what is the transparent strategic plan that is going to get our city clean and keep our city clean. And I don't have a Netflix special coming out, but if anybody would like to support me, right now I'm really pushing for the book. I'm trying to sell 30,000 books in 40 days. And so far I just hit over 200 books sold in the first 6 days of my pre-sale for the book. And just look out. I have a lot of things in the works coming up that I really want to try to implement and attack illegal dumping in the city.
And you're hoping for zero litter by 2025?
Yeah. But if Nick becomes street commissioner next year, we could chop that down to like 24, 23.
And Nick, your original goal was zero waste by 2035, was it what you said?
Yeah, 2035, yeah.
Wow. Great things to shoot for. All right.
Yeah, good goals. I'm with you, Terrell.
Terrell for mayor, Nick for streets commissioner. Here we go.
Dream team. It's a dream. We can work together. He can be then, I can be in B, but we can work together.
I want to thank Terrell Hagler, Ron White, Nick Esposito for joining us. So glad all of you are here. Really appreciate this. This will be up on our YouTube channel shortly, so do push friends in that direction. Next week, Monarch Butterflies. A week after that, World on the Wing, Migratory Birds. And then in a couple of weeks after that, we'll be celebrating Mindy Maslin's award for planting 20,000 trees, which is also good for reducing litter. So that's what we got, a busy couple of weeks coming up. Fly, Eagles, fly. Thank you all so much.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Night.
night. Yeah,
Thanks.
feel free to unmute and say good night. Thank you. Anything you'd like. Feel free to unmute everybody.
Thank you, Terrell. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Ron.
Hey, thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good to see you.
Good job, you guys.
Good
Thank you.
program.
I love my sanitation workers.
They love you right back.
Yeah.
I-
Thank goodness for all of you.
Yeah, no kidding.
I bake cookies for my sanitation workers and they totally love them. Chocolate
Oh,
chips ahoy, the whole 9
that's good.
yards.
And they put your trash cans back in the correct way, don't they?
You said it.
Thank you, Hadley.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.